I look after my husband, who is 85, and I've been looking after him more or less full time, I suppose, for the last 4 years. I'm 82, so it's getting to be quite hard. 4.5 years ago we moved here because previously he'd had a fairly major heart operation, and it was obvious he was going to be getting a bit weak. But when we moved here he could still help. At the time I thought it was a bit odd that he wasn't organising things, like I had to clear the whole garage myself, and that surprised me because he's always been helpful, but I thought, I don't know. And he'd been deaf as well, and he didn't seem to do things. I thought, I put it down to him not hearing. Anyway, we moved down here, and then one day he'd been up to the advantage of this very nice bungalow not far from the co-op, and we were looking forward to him being able to nip up to the co-op on his bicycle, because up to 4.5 years ago we were still going off in our camper van, and on the way back he fell off his bike and fractured his femur. Then he was in hospital for a bit. Then a couple of months later he got a urinary tract infection and then pneumonia at the same time. So he was in hospital for 3 weeks and he was hallucinating a lot. Anyway, to cut a long story short, a couple of months after that he was diagnosed with dementia because he had an accident with the car. We were very lucky that it wasn't worse than it was. Anyway, that was the end of him driving. So, as you can imagine, he was diagnosed with Alzheimer's. He also had an underlying condition which he'd got 30 years ago, an immune system disorder. And they'd said then, about 30 years ago, that he would only live for about 7 years. We'd always wanted to live in the country, so we retired early and came up here. So at first, his immune system disorder flared up, and he had to go into hospital again, and that went badly because the haematologist put him on the highest possible dose of steroids. He'd already had to take steroids for the last 25 years because of his immune system disorder. And our GP wasn't very happy about it, and she managed to get it down, but in the meantime I think his memory was more damaged, and he was also quite bonkers. If he was hot at night, he'd cut the wires for his electric blanket. He'd do dangerous things. So obviously I was constantly on the alert. That sort of calmed down, and he's got breathing problems and heart problems, immune system disorder, and he's been treated for prostate and a hernia with the Alzheimer's on top. So he has a lot of medical appointments and a lot of medication, and keeping up with them all is very difficult. And recently he's become incontinent of bowels as well. He sometimes just doesn't get there in time, and then other times he doesn't go for days and I have to give him laxative, and then suddenly it all comes up at once, and then it can take me 2 to 3 hours to clean everything up. And often that happens in the night, so there's no help you can get for that. But I think the hardest thing, quite honestly, is losing him, because gradually I haven't lost him. He's an absolute sweetheart. He does everything he can to be helpful, and he, up to fairly recently, up to last year in fact, he always used to read to me because we're both very interested in politics and world affairs and things like that. And he used to read a particular journal that I take in the mornings just for half an hour, and it was lovely. And up to about a year ago he could still do that, and now he can't read hardly anything. And it's really like a constant grieving process, and yet you don't know how long it's going to go on. And there's half of me thinks, I hope he doesn't linger on too long, because I don't want either of us, to suffer what I've read about the worst aspects of Alzheimer's particularly. And yet the other bit of me just doesn't want, I do everything possible to make sure he's comfortable and keep him safe and keep him well. People say he wouldn't still be here if you didn't look after him so well, and it's true up to a point, but of course it's beginning to get just lately I've been thinking, I can't cope with this, but I don't want him, I know everybody has this fear of going into a home, and I don't want him to. I do have help once a week. A lady comes in to shower him, and I think the main help of that is that somebody kind of knows I still exist, because I think that's one of the difficulties as a carer, that the disadvantage in a way for me is that because I'm in many ways very young and strong for my age, and people don't think I'm as old as I am, But actually my stamina runs out much more quickly. And I think I'm in a constant state of anxiety. Sometimes I'm aware, like at the moment, in the last few weeks, I've been very anxious. But even when I'm less anxious than I am now, I know that I can become anxious very quickly, and that can lead me to feeling quite giddy, not stable on my feet. I've got feet problems anyway. So again, it's something that happens with old age, that your balance isn't so good. I've done exercises and things, but it hasn't really helped. I think it's anxiety more than anything, and concentration. And I think it's because my mind is so busy that my own concentration is not good. So I'm still getting everything done, I'm still coping, but I sort of think, this is taking me hours. Maybe that would have happened anyway. People get into their 80s, they do find the same problem, so I just don't know. But I take him out every afternoon and I park somewhere where there's a nice little hill. I can see the car, but it's a grassy mound, so that I can still walk up and downhill, because going downhill was my main panic problem. And I was doing extremely well and really sort of feeling quite fit. And then we went somewhere else and I walked a little way up. It's only a slight path going stony. And of course I fell right into a bed of nettles. And I was hoping desperately somebody would come and pick me up, but they didn't. And I was thinking, God stands in the car, I'm not going to get back. I was all right, I've got very strong bones, fortunately. So anyway, since then, I'm all right, but my head has been a bit wonky. And there again, you see, I thought, oh God, I don't want to tell anybody. They'll tell me to go to the doctor. And I thought, no, I know I'm all right. If I go to the doctor, they'll say, go to the hospital, and I thought, I can't face that. It's just too much. So I suppose in that way, I tend not to want to go to the doctor about things, because you end up with more to do, which you're not convinced is going to help much anyway. So I suppose that's the way. I'm just tired. Sometimes I sleep, but no, I tend to have to go into the next room. We always start off in the same bed because I like to cuddle him. What's left is at least affection and cuddling. It's not fair. I can tell him my troubles and he'll say, oh. Yeah. But he can't really. 2 minutes later he'll ask me for something and it's obvious that he hasn't remembered. But even so, I still tell him anyway. It's better than keeping it inside my head.